Welcome to Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast. These are the stories of those who have received, given, and who are waiting for the gift of life, organ transplantation. Now here's your host and heart and kidney recipient, BJ Odom.
Welcome to the Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant podcast, where we explore the extraordinary world of organ transplantation. I'm your host, BJ Odom. Each week we share inspiring stories and introduce you to remarkable individuals sharing their own transplant stories. Be sure to support the podcast by leaving a 5-star review and subscribing on your preferred podcast platform. Have a transplant story to share with us? We'd love to hear from you. Just email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Check out our website, giftoflifepodcast.com. That's giftoflifepodcast.com. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook. And we welcome you now to episode number 55. This week, we sit down and talk with Terri, who was 16 years old when diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma and needed 10 rounds of chemo. Doctors told her that this could lead to kidney or heart problems later in life. Well, life went on for Terri, and at the age of 42, she was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy, where her heart transplant journey began. In fact, she was the first heart transplant performed at the Christ Hospital in Cincinnati, Ohio. Today, she shares her story with all of us, and it's coming up next. Today, we're talking with Terri Cecere, who is a heart transplant recipient. So nice to have you on the phone with us. And before we get started, Terri, why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself?
I am 65 years old and recovering nicely from my heart transplant. My condition started, I guess, when I was 16 years old, I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And at that time, I received 10 cycles of chemotherapy. Something that stuck with me during that time, my hematologist always said to me, this medicine could cause permanent damage to my kidneys or to my heart. And that just always stuck with me. And he said, so we're going to do 8 doses, he told me initially, of this medication. And, we'll check you before we give you your medicine each week. And they did that and everything seemed to be good. And then when we got to 8 doses of the medication, he said, 10's the maximum I can give you. Why don't we go ahead and do, 2 more, puts 2 more. So I was like, okay, we'll do 2 more. And then I'm thinking the whole time, how does he know that that's the maximum amount I can have? We did the 2 more doses and life went on. I got married when I was 18 and didn't know if I would be able to have children because of the medication. But we were blessed with 2 children. Our daughter, Joanna, was born 2 years later after we were married, and our son, Nicholas, 2 years after our daughter was born. And so life continued. I went for my minimum 5-year checkups and, no issues, and I was considered in remission, and life went on until I was 42 when our second grandson was born, and then started having some issues with difficulty breathing, getting my breath, coughing. They just continued to progress. I couldn't walk very far with being out of breath. I'd have to, self-talk myself. You can do it. Just take, a couple more steps. You can get through this. And finally went to the doctor, was diagnosed with cardiomyopathy. And so we saw a specialist then, and a cardiologist, and I had regressed after 2 years of treatment. I had felt good during those first 2 years, and I remember going back for my second-year checkup, and she said, "Oh, you're doing great. Everything's good." And as I walked out of the building, I thought, if I'm doing so great, why do I feel like crap? And things progressed downward then. And then I got in touch with, through my sister who worked for a cardiologist in a cath lab, through her and through my husband's cousin, who was a nurse we figured out what we needed to say and got in touch with a heart failure specialist, initially at the University of Cincinnati. And she took me in and wanted to see me and treated me and did what she needed to do. And she said, I don't think you're feeling as good as what you really think you're feeling. And at that time, she introduced me to her fellow student who was there with her at the time training. And his name is Dr. O'Brien. And after he finished his fellowship, I continued on with him for the next 18 years. And he specialized in heart failure. And so I just went with him, and he went to the Christ Hospital in Cincinnati, and I've stayed with him since then. And then in September, in the fall of 2022, then I was diagnosed with advanced heart failure and then referred to the heart failure team, the advanced heart failure team at the Christ Hospital. And from then, things fell into place for the transplant.
Now, what did you think or feel when you were told that you're going to need a transplant?
I was really shocked. It was like, I knew the end game. I knew with, cardiomyopathy that you could end there and you couldn't live with cardiomyopathy forever. And 17 years was a pretty long run for that. But I felt good. Now, I think I was in a false sense of security because COVID had hit at that time too. So in 2020, I virtually didn't do anything. Once COVID hit, pretty much I stayed in place at home, and, it wasn't among family or anybody because I didn't want to get exposed to COVID. And I think during that time, because I wasn't out grocery shopping, I wasn't out visiting, I wasn't doing things, I think as my condition worsened, I really didn't sense it. And I adapted to, where I was. And after COVID in 2022, then we started getting out a little bit more and doing more. And when I went to, I had my normal tests, my echocardiogram and some other things that I had yearly. And I went to see Dr. O'Brien then, and he said, you're in advanced heart failure. And when we heard that, I looked at George. He was sitting there with me in the doctor's office. He's always gone to all my appointments. And it just felt like, a slap across the face. It was like, what do you mean advanced heart failure, And because then I knew we were out of options. There wasn't a device that they could put in me. There was technically, we learned, but there wasn't a medication. My options were becoming limited. My choices were an LVAD, a left ventricle assist device, or the transplant. And so we started testing for the transplant or the LVAD because they pretty much ran together to see which I would be. They said we always have the LVAD on the shelf. It's always here, should we need that before a transplant would come, but transplant would be our goal. And so then we started that whole process with the testing.
That's always fun. I remember going through the testing twice because I had a heart and a kidney. And people that have not had a transplant or went through it don't really realize all of the hoops. And it's not really hoops. It's just a lot of testing that one has to go through.
You're absolutely correct. Yeah. I mean, just things you don't think of, and it's once they start that battery of testing and, it's just, they keep calling, here's another appointment for you. Here's another appointment. And it at that time seemed like it was never ending.
Yeah, it always was, surprising too, because they did a lot of psychic, want to make sure you're, in good shape and not really good shape, but mentally you're in good shape. So you'll take care of your organ that is donated. And I don't know. I don't know what, when I went through those, I just thought it was kind of funny and weird, just all at the same time. But and then they had to talk to my wife to make sure I wasn't crazy. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, they're going to talk to my wife. Now they are going to think I'm crazy.
She might I don't want her again. My plan was always act to, I told my kids when they were growing up that I was going to act just a little bit left center of normal so that when I wasn't so normal that they wouldn't know. I could find myself more time off somewhere. So, the psychological testing, you don't think about that as being a component in this, but it's a big part because until you go through it, you don't really realize all the emotions you're going to feel and, the fight back post-transplant.
So what would you say was probably your low point, if I could ask?
The low point was post-transplant because pre-transplant, everything went pretty quickly. And we were really surprised by that. Post-transplant, just being in the hospital, and I just had a lot of issues with the prednisone, and my body was holding on to so much water and so much weight that my legs felt like they were logs and they looked like logs. And I just couldn't pull myself up. I couldn't get myself up. And just the lack of strength that I had. But they told me, that they were going to take me to my knees. It was going to, and they meant it. And I had to fight back.
Well, I'm glad you did. And I hope you're feeling better now. And things are rocking.
I am. Right. Yes. And actually, I was the first heart transplant recipient at the Christ Hospital in Cincinnati. They have done many kidney transplants, but their heart transplant was just opening up. And just to backtrack a little bit, they had started looking into getting certified for that during COVID, right before COVID. And once COVID came, then that was shelved because, the CVICUs and all the other rooms and everything was needed for COVID patients. And so when I came in 2022, when I went to meet the surgeon in October 22, they had just gotten their surgeon in place and the medical director in place and all that was going, and they were getting their steps ready. They thought maybe by the end of 2022 that they would be ready. They had everything they needed in place, but they were shooting for the end of, December of 2022. And then when I came along, doing the testing in October of 2022, I remember sitting there with one of the doctors and I said, he's showing me the LVAD and I see the LVAD and I just start crying. I thought, oh my gosh, I don't know, that's going to be, emotional and hard to manage that. And so he said, we'll see, look, transplant is our goal, but we'll look. And I said, well, where would I have to go for a transplant? Because I knew they weren't a transplant center. And there was UC in Cincinnati. And of course, in Ohio, we have Ohio State, we have Cleveland Clinic. And those were all further away for me from where we live. And he said, but we've applied to get our certification. This was in early October. And he said, we're hoping by the end of the month, the end of October, that we'll know something. And 4 days later, we got a call. They had received their certification. And so that was all in place, good to go. And I met with the surgeon then, did different testing and met with the surgeon at the end of October. And he said, he's looking at my tests and he said, I don't know how you even walked in here. He said, you shouldn't be here. And he said, we're going to admit you and we're going to get going on this and see what we can do. So from there we started then, and I was admitted into the hospital on the 26th of October. We did some testing and then a lot of, the heart caths and different tests. And then it was determined that we needed to go for the transplant. So an Impella was implanted. And so then I had to be in the CVICU after that device was implanted because that was then pumping my heart and you're attached to this machine. And after that, then they listed me on November 1st. And then by November 4th, I heard that they had a heart for me. I think they had denied 2 others previous to that, but they had a heart and we were a go for transplant. And on the night of the 5th, November 5th, the heart arrived, and I was wheeled into surgery that evening, and we finished on the morning of the 6th of November. So my heart transplant started on the 5th, ended on the 6th. So I guess my transplant date is November 6th, they said, once the surgery was finished.
Now, did you say it was the very first transplant, the heart transplant there at the hospital?
Yes, I was their very first heart transplant patient.
One, it's amazing to be number one. But now, did that worry you a little bit going, whoa, this is their first attempt at this?
Yes, it did. But we had done some research on Dr. Dowling, and he had, he was, well renowned, and his team. And so I felt comfortable with that. And I felt very comfortable with him when we first met him, that, we just clicked, and I felt it would be good. And he wasn't new to transplant. He had years of doing this. He could, do it in his sleep. And we also have dear family friends whose son works for a transplant team in Wisconsin. And he called us and talked to us. And he said, maybe being the first one isn't so bad. He said, maybe, they're going to be all over it. They're going to be diligent. They're going to, you're not going to be able to burp without, them not knowing about it. And my goodness, that was the case, man. That everybody, the whole hospital, was on alert. And the teams that came in, the transplant team, the CVICU team, the cardiac team, everybody. I mean, there were always people, outside my door. I mean, you have that wall of windows, and the door slides open, just like you see in the movies and the TV shows. And there was always a team of doctors out there. And sometimes I just would, close my eyes and pretend I was sleeping. So I could have just 5 minutes, just leave me alone. But yeah, they were all over everything. And I just felt so confident in the team and the CVICU nurses. And they were wonderful, just how much they knew. I mean, and the workload that they had. The doctors come in and say, do this, and, they're all over it. And they really, know their craft. And Dr. O'Brien, we had been with him for 17 years, and so we felt comfortable with him. And, it just felt right. It felt right. And so we put our faith in them and, moved on from there.
You know what? And as you're speaking there, and I'm thinking about this, when you first said number one, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I don't know. I might have went to another hospital because I was going to be number one. But as you explained to me, I think you're right, because being number one, you're very important to that hospital and that program. Exactly. So their eyes are going to be wide open. Every time, even today, every time you step in, they're like, okay, this is number one. Let's keep rolling here. Yeah, so
you're absolutely right. We just closed out Donate Life Month was yesterday, the last day of the month, and it was Donor Remembrance Day. And we actually worked 3 education tables for our OPO, the Organ Procurement Organization, Network for Hope. And, we do an education table down in the cafeteria, and, you get to see everybody coming by, and we have all kinds of, Donate Life information and little goodies to hand out and stuff. And I couldn't believe how many people came by the table. Yes, I see you on our website. And doctors, so many of the doctors were there and just coming right up to the table, nurses from the CVICU, and, all remembering me, and, and I'm like, I don't recognize you people without your masks on, because you had masks on the whole time. But yes, they tell me that almost every visit. Yeah, and I'm not sure it's me they recognize or my husband, George, because George has a long gray ponytail. And I think I could probably slip by, but as soon as they see him, they're like, oh, okay, I know him, and that's the area.
And you know what? We're going to talk to him on next week's program, and I'm looking forward to it, because he's done a caregivers support group, and he's really into working with all these people. So I'm really interested in getting his take. So I'm excited about that.
It has become his mission. Yes, absolutely. And I have to give a shout out to him. He is the best caregiver anyone could ever have in this situation.
Awesome. So
Definitely
now,
go.
so now that you're through it all, and your appointments have been going pretty well, is there everything good right now, or where are we at in the process?
Yeah, we've had some bumps in the road. 30 days home post-transplant, I had to go back, and we were almost airlifted because I sort of passed out. My blood pressure and heart rate fell really quickly, and my heart rate was down to 25 when the EMS squad is here. And so they're on one phone, and George is on the phone with the medical director on the other, and they're like, we got to get her here. We need her here. And so they're all talking together, and, where can we land the helicopter and this, that, and the other. And then I started, I was never out. I was always conscious and aware, but I started coming to, and the team felt that I had stabilized. And so the squad then took me to the Christ Hospital in Cincinnati, with lights and sirens and everything, and got me there. And I was admitted, and then it was decided that I needed to have a pacemaker. And so they implanted this a leadless pacemaker. It's about maybe an inch long. It's got these little hooks on it, and it's implanted in my heart. And that way it doesn't interfere, the leads aren't in the heart. It doesn't interfere with the biopsies and such. But so I've had that, and I've been stable, with pacing pretty much ever since then. And then had some issues with my lungs, I can't remember what they called it, but a pleural effusion is what it was. And it kind of filling with, there was blood and some other stuff. So I had to have different things done with that to get the drainage out of there. And then went home after 11 days in the hospital, and then was doing well and getting stronger. And then I was diagnosed at, 6 months they take you off of the antivirals, I believe, is when I went off the antiviral medication that I was put on post-transplant. And I had a bout with CMV.
Okay.
And that virus, it was, I had gotten from my donor. So they treated that, and I was in the hospital for that for 5 days, and then had a bout of that again 3 months later. But so far, no other issues with that. So other than the CMV and the implanting of the pacemaker, I've been pretty good. Yeah,
good.
Doing pretty good. Now, currently, we're dealing with a little CAV, which is cardiac vasculopathy. It's the A. I need an A in there. Cardiac allograft vasculopathy, and so that's like heart disease for a non-transplant patient, but for a heart transplant patient, it's the narrowing of the vessels. It's a stenosis, and there's really not anything that they can do for it. So it's not that it's plaque buildup or anything like that. It's the vessel itself that narrows.
Now, is this possibly, because I kind of relate to this because I have battled with this for probably the last 10 years, if not more. But what they call it at TGH, Tampa General Hospital, is donor-specific antibodies are causing it. And it sounds like we're experiencing the same thing here.
It could be, yes. And so, it's being treated. They changed my cholesterol medicine. They upped it to 80 milligrams. And they also are switching me from the Tacro to sirolimus. And, that's to help slow the progression. So hopefully, I'll just keep moving along, and it'll stay status quo, and we'll go from there.
So, Terri,
but otherwise feeling really great.
Now, how far out are you from the surgery day?
I am 2.5 years out.
All right. Now, let me ask you, and this may be a question you don't have the answer to, but just kind of curious if you would know it, because I can't tell you how many, transplants after mine they had or what number they're on, but how many transplants has the facility done now, to date, as far as, the last time you heard count?
Sure. Actually, I do know that. They are now up to 46, and I think they're expecting to hit 50 this summer.
Awesome.
So in the 2 years, yeah, it's really great.
Well, I'm glad you're doing good. And now, like you said, you've been working the tables, which that means all of us transplant patients know what you're talking about. Because it seems like,
right, yeah.
I know that, I knew what a transplant was and I'd heard of a transplant. And I was even told maybe someday I was going to need a transplant. But that all goes in the back of your mind. Doesn't go
You're exactly
to
right.
the front of your mind. But now that it's done, I know with me, you're out there like I'm doing this podcast, I was in radio all my life and this is kind of what I've done for a living. And I go, wow, I should be doing a podcast on transplants because,
yes.
the more people are aware, the better we are to get more donors. And you just become a soldier, for organ transplantation. And you know how important those donors are and you really work for the cause. How much did that change you?
A lot. Initially, as you're recovering, you're not thinking about all the importance of that. And then as you make your way through your recuperation, you think, you know what, I need to pay it forward. I need to pay it back. I need people to be aware. I wasn't aware of the process. I wasn't aware of the number of people in need. You hear about it or you see it in a movie or a TV show, but then it's not, up front in your mind. It's, just something that you've heard of. And so when George, my husband, got involved with working with the organ procurement agencies, and in our area, we have Network for Hope. That's the organization that procured my heart. And we also have one close by. It's Life Connection of Ohio. And so it's close also. So we spend our time working, helping, volunteering for both of them, to pay it forward and do what we can do to get the word out there about the importance of organ donation. And then we also are working with student organ donation
awareness
advocacy.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
SOTA. You're working with SOTA then.
Yes, we're also working with SOTA, and we just started that last year. And we, are helping them. We go to a couple of we go to speak to them at their school, and they want, if they want ideas about things, and we're just really helping to be mentors to them. And what they're doing is wonderful. Also, these students out there raising awareness.
Yeah, I talked to Sophia just a couple of weeks ago. We had her on the show, and then a ways back we also had her on. But now they have some scholarships. So if you want to check into that, go to sotanational.org / and I think it is scholarships. Yes. And so if you're a young person that is working with, organ donation, and you have people, in your family, or people, or you're just really out there trying to make awareness, those could be some good scholarships to check out. So great organization.
Yes, it is. And so, mentoring them and working with the two OPOs, it's just been really wonderful, and we're learning more. And the number of people that we are meeting that are involved in it in somehow, yes, my cousin, or I have a neighbor who, was a living organ donor. Somebody who, just the number of people who are really connected to it. You don't think about it because it doesn't come up in your everyday conversation necessarily if you're not a recipient or a donor family member.
Now,
go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt you there.
I just was going to say, it just gives us such joy being around these people and hearing their stories. We had a meeting at our OPO Life Center, and it was just for the ambassadors just to get to know one another. And it was really a beautiful thing to see, because we were sitting around these tables And it took about 45 minutes. It was just real organic. Everyone told their story, and, donor families and recipients and living donors. And it was wonderful to hear their stories, and the donor families, especially, the passion that they all have. And I've written to my donor family, but did not hear back from them. And I understand that, but being able to connect with other donor families and hearing how grateful they are that, we're out there continuing life gives them such joy and happiness, because you never know how they're going to feel about it. And I realize that some donor families, they need time. They, may never be ready to talk to the recipients, and that's okay too. But feeling the connection with the donor families I have met, they've kind of become my surrogate donor family. So, and I really appreciate that.
Yeah, there's some special people, that's for sure.
Absolutely.
One of my stories, and I've told it many times here on the podcast, I was also a comedian for many years. And so maybe 6 months to a year after I had my transplant, I was back on the comedy scene, and it was pretty early after, it was like one of my first shows, after finally getting back on stage and beginning to work again. And I always mention in my act that I'm a heart and kidney transplant recipient. And I had a gentleman, big burly guy. I mean, he looked like he could punch me out in 30 seconds. Came up to me and he says, did you really have a heart transplant, or is that just part of your act? And I said, no, sir, I really did have a heart transplant. And I was like, oh my God, did I say something stupid, or is this guy going to be offended? Is he going to punch me? What's going to happen? And he took me and he hugged me like I'd never been hugged in my entire life. And he said, oh my goodness, my brother died about a month ago, and this is the first time I've been out, and he was an organ donor. And I know, you weren't the recipient, but seeing you up on that stage tonight, I saw my brother and I just had the best time. And that just took me to my knees.
I bet. Yes. That's very, yeah. I mean, you weren't expecting to hear anything like that. And that's just an amazing, amazing story and experience for you.
Yes. So, and I've had a few of the donor, I'd like to have more, but I've had a few of the donor mothers on the podcast, and to hear their stories are truly amazing. And I heard from one mother who actually, heard the son's heartbeat and another human being. And as a heart recipient, to me, it wasn't hard to hear, but it was very emotional for me during that entire interview. But it was good because she says, I kind of feel my son still living in, these individuals that got, some of his organs. And so she,
right. Yes.
It wasn't really closure, but it gave her, peace or something. I don't know how to explain it, but you could just hear it in her voice.
Seeing someone on the other side, this is for what we went through, this is the reward, seeing other people being able to continue their lives.
Well, before we, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was just going to say also, as a comedian, you could probably put a lot of stuff out there about your experience in the CVICU. I mean, there's no dignity once you're a patient in the CVICU.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. You could do a whole comedy routine on that, I'm sure.
Oh, I had material on, part of the experience as far as getting it. Of course, I'm not going to, I had a joke where, talking about the psyche part of it. They needed to interview my wife, and the joke was they had her in there for hours and hours and hours. And the doctor walked down and says, now I don't know. Now I can't figure out. Well, now see, I haven't done my acting since COVID hit. I haven't been out on the road. But the doctor comes up and says, I can't see why you don't want to commit suicide, young man. That was a bad joke, but it really went over well on the crowds.
Yeah. I'm sure, yes.
Well, is there anything that you would like to, share with the folks before we let you go?
No, just other than, it's so great to talk to other recipients and the donor families, just to hear their experiences. I mean, we all share this common journey, and experience. And people who haven't been through it don't really know what's going on. They're kind. Oh, good for you. I'm glad, you look great. That's the one thing, you tell people you had a heart transplant and they look at you and they're like, like the shock in their eyes. I don't know what they were expecting me to look like, but they're like, oh my gosh, they can't believe it. I don't know what in their mind, their vision is of someone who had a transplant, but they're just like, you look good. You're amazing. You look at you sitting there and, but yes, this is the reward. This is, how we look afterwards. We do come back and, pay it forward, but just sharing the joy with others who have been there and some of, the issues, like you said, you could relate to a similar situation that I'm going through right now with what you've been diagnosed with. Also, we're familiar with the experience, and other people, like some of my family members, once they heard, they would say, well, how are you doing? This was months out. Oh, good, great. Like it was a cure. And I would say, yes, I'm doing better. I'm not in heart failure anymore. I don't have cardiomyopathy, but now I have a new path. And there will be, some hitches in the road with it, but overall, it's just a wonderful experience and an amazing opportunity to get the one thing that most people don't get. But, you ask them what they want and they want more time. Mm-hmm. And you don't get more time. We got more time.
Right.
We got more time. So we're very fortunate.
Well, I'm glad you're doing good. And like I said, every journey, and that's one of the things the doctors told me too. I remember, and the nurses after my transplant, they said, because you'd ask questions like, how long should I live? How's this going? All these questions. And they told me, and it makes a lot of sense, every case is different. No two cases are the same. People have different blood types. People have different, anatomy. Everything is different about every individual. And so someone may jump out after a heart transplant and be, just raring to go, while others take longer to recuperate and have different difficulties. But it's a journey for sure. But it's a journey that we're happy that we're going through and blessed to spend, like you said, more time with family and friends.
Right, absolutely. And thank you so much for all you're doing to inform people about the need for organ, eye, and tissue donation and the experience it is that we go through as recipients and that donors go through. It's just a wonderful thing to help educate the people. And thank you so much for having me on the show today.
Thank you, Terri, for sharing your amazing story with us today on the Gift of Life podcast. Be sure to join us each week for a new heartfelt episode. If you have a transplant story, email us, giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Again, that's giftoflifepodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Gift of Life, the Organ Transplant Podcast, or check out the website, giftoflifepodcast.com. Also, don't forget to like and share this episode with friends and family. And we'd really appreciate that 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform. Another podcast you might enjoy is myself and my former radio partner, Bill Stevens. BJ and Bill, the podcast, all on the Podcast Playground Network, home of some great podcasters. And of course, we thank them for making this podcast possible. Until next time, I'm BJ Odom. Thank you for being a part of our journey and reminding us all to appreciate each and every day and to treasure the extraordinary gift of life.
He was running on empty, heart fading fast. Doctor said, man, you ain't gonna last. But a stranger's kindness, a gift so true, turned the night sky into something new. He got a second chance, he got a brand new spark. like a freight train rolling back from the dark. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. 15 years later, the road got rough. The fight ain't over when the climb is tough. Needed a kidney, the race was on. Another hero stepped up, kept him strong. Every breath he takes is a tale of hope. One life saved, another can cope. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. Doctor's hands, a donor's grace, running on down to a brand new place. Second chances don't come twice, but when they do, man, they feel so nice. Let's spread the word, let the people know. One yes today lets a miracle grow. You don't need wings just to save a man. Just a little love, a helping hand. Gift of life, let the story be told. One heart beats, another takes hold. Give a little, save a soul. Ain't no greater rock and roll. BJ still rocking, still standing tall. Thanks to the ones who gave it all. Gift of life, hear the sound. Pass it on, pass it down. The Gift of Life podcast hosted by BJ Odom. Listen now. Listen now.